Did a 17th century farm worker predict Scotland's future?
This is Channory Point on the Black Isle. The observant among you will have noticed that it's neither black nor an isle. It's a good place to watch for dolphins at high tide. I haven't seen any yet, but it's also the place where the Brahan Seer, Scotland's answer to Nostradamus, is said to have met with a hot, sticky end. But what's the story? Did he really predict the future? Did he really exist? Welcome to Scotland Unplugged and the story of Coinneach Odhar, the Brahan Seer. One reason it could be called the Black Isle is because it's low down and the snow doesn't lie here. It looks dark and foreboding against the surrounding hills, especially in the winter. Another could be that it's been home to a lot of dark arts over the years. Kenneth MacKenzie, or Coinneach Odhar, Scots Gaelic for Dark Kenneth or Sallow Kenneth, is said to have been born in the parish of Uig on the Isle of Lewis in the mid-17th century. His mother supposedly had the second sight, and one night, while she was tending cows up on a hillside above a graveyard, she saw the dead leave their graves and head off in different directions. All but one returned. So not backwards and coming forwards, she made her way down there and blocked the last grave with her stick, stopping the ghost of a Norwegian princess returning to her tomb. Knowing she had the right to ask for something in exchange for letting the spirit pass, she asked that her son was given the gift of second sight. Later, young Coinneach found an adder stone, or a hag stone, a stone with a hole in it. The legend goes that he could see things through the hole. Apparently you can sometimes find hag stones on this beach. But given what happened to Kenneth, I won't be looking. There are a couple of versions of how he found the stone. One is that the spirit told his mother to look for it in a nearby loch. Other versions are a bit darker. He moved to the Black Isle to work for the MacKenzies of Seaforth at the invitation of the 3rd Earl, also called Kenneth, just to confuse us. It's said that he worked as a labourer, and in a couple of different accounts that he fell asleep while he was out cutting peat and woke to find the stone in his pocket. He was known for being quick-witted and for having a mouth that ran away with itself at times, and that apparently annoyed the wife of the farmer he was working for. So much so, she decided her best option was just to poison him. But Kenneth looked through his adder stone and saw what had happened. And when possibly his wife, possibly not, delivered his dinner, he fed it to his collie, who then died. Anyway, somehow he got hold of the stone, and that meant he had the second sight. Hopefully without murdering a dog. From then on, Coinneach was a prediction machine, a prognosticator extraordinaire, and popular. His predictions and his wit meant he was always in demand at the gatherings of the great and the not so good, a bit like Dynamo doing corporate gigs these days. He said that one day ships will sail round the back of Tomnahurich Hill, which would have seemed impossible, but eventually the Caledonian Canal did allow ships to sail right past it. He said the day would come when fire and water would run in streams through all the streets and lanes of Inverness, which makes sense if you think about piped gas and water. He walked past Culloden Moor one day. In those days it wasn't known as Culloden Moor, it was known as Dramossy. O Dramossy, thy bleak moor shall, ere many generations have passed away, be stained with the best blood of the Highlands. Glad am I that I will not see the day, for it will be a fearful period. Heads will be lopped off by the score, and no mercy will be shown or quarter given on either side. Bad stuff did happen at Culloden. He said the people will degenerate as their country improves, that the clans will become so effeminate as to flee from their native country before an army of sheep. And a lot of people have taken that as the Highland clearances. He said long strings of carriages without horses would run between Dingwall and Inverness, and more wonderful still between Dingwall and the Isle of Skye, that fiery chariots and black bridleless horses would pass through the Muir of Ord, apparently predicting the railways. He said the day would come when the hills of Ross would be strewed with ribbons. More recently, he's said to have predicted the Second World War, Aberdeen oil, possibly Chernobyl, the Piper Alpha disaster and Margaret Thatcher. There is a bit of a problem though. We have zero evidence that he actually existed. There is not a single contemporary account of the Brahan Seer. Everything we think we know about him came from the 1877 book, The Prophecies of the Brahan Seer, by the folklorist Alexander MacKenzie. The problem is he was a folklorist and called MacKenzie, and living 200 years after the seer supposedly did. And there's quite a lot of confirmation bias in the mix. For instance, the hills of Ross being strewn with ribbons is these days taken to mean power lines, but back in 1877, Alexander took it to mean roads. Kind of shows how you can read different things into different predictions. Also, obviously, everything Alexander says Coinneach had predicted happened before the book was written. And as for the often quoted predictions about World War II, Maggie T, etc., you don't see all of them in the book.
Some have suggested Alexander just made the whole thing up, but not everyone's quite so sure.
But this is the Eagle Stone in the very pretty village of Strathpeffer. It's actually a Class 1 Pictish stone. It's thought that it dates to before the 7th century, before Christianity. After that, there would invariably have been crosses on the stone. It hasn't always been here. It's thought that originally it was down there somewhere in the Strath Valley. Traditionally, it's said to have marked the spot where some Munro clansmen were killed in a battle in the 15th century. It shows a horseshoe or a rainbow or some kind of arch over an eagle. Alexander MacKenzie wrote that when he came here, he encountered two herders who told him of a prophecy.
When the stone falls a third time, ships will be able to sail into Strathpeffer and anchor on it.
Supposedly it has already fallen twice, and they're not taking any chances. That's well and truly concreted in there.
Maybe superstition, or maybe just health and safety.
But there was a real Coinneach Odhar. The 1577 Scottish Parliament records show a writ for his arrest. A royal commission ordered the apprehension of a Coinneach Odhar and others for sorcery. But obviously he lived in the 16th century, long before the time of the 3rd Lord and Lady Seaforth, and there are no records of what actually happened next. There's also a record of a Coinneach Odhar being arrested for illegally trading in animal skins around the same time. Meanwhile, back in the 17th century, the Brahan Seer is said to have come to a pretty painful end on account of his mouth. Following the restoration of Charles II, Lord Seaforth was in Paris, and Lady Isabella Seaforth was concerned. She hadn't had any letters for a while, and she was worried for her husband's well-being, so she called for the seer. Coinneach took up his stone as the household watched on. He looked through the hole, laughed, and said his lordship was fine and in rude health. All good then. But there seemed to be something behind his laughter. Lady Seaforth wasn't happy. Concern switched to suspicion, and she asked him to describe the situation her husband was in. Coinneach told her to be happy that her husband was safe, but she wanted to know more. Eventually, after a bunch of threats, he told her that Lord Seaforth was with another woman and not thinking about home. At that point, Lady Seaforth kind of lost it. The seer had embarrassed her, called her husband's name into disrepute, and all this in front of a crowd. She had him dragged from Bran Castle and brought here, where he was tipped into a spiked barrel of burning tar. Apparently, he hadn't seen that coming. But before he burned, he did two things. First of all, he raised the adder stone to his eye and made one last prediction. I see into the far future, and I read the doom of the race of my oppressor. The long descended line of Seaforth will, ere many generations have passed, end in extinction and in sorrow. He predicted that the last of the line would be struck deaf and dumb, and though he would father 4 sons, he'd have to watch them all die.
Francis Humberston MacKenzie, the last of the Seaforths, did lose his hearing to a bout of scarlet fever, and that left him with limited speech.
And then he did have 4 sons, all of whom died.
But the seer wasn't done yet.
Then he threw his stone into either a loch or into a cow's hoofprint, at which point Loch Eusay supposedly bubbled up from said hoofprint, and the seer said that one day a fisherman would find a stone in the belly of a pike, and they would become the new seer. I mean, that part does sound a bit far-fetched. So, did he exist? I suppose what I would say is, in Alexander Mackenzie's defence, he has put every different version of the story into the book. It's not like he's actually written one single narrative, he's gathered stuff from different sources. Okay, they aren't written sources and we can't track them down, but it's not like he's sold a particular version of the story. His version of the story is a bunch of different cobbled together things, which suggests he did take them from folklore. It seems fairly likely, given that there was at least one Coinneach Odhar living in the 16th century, that he's a composite. It's not a massive stretch then if someone called Coinneach Odhar was being pursued for witchcraft, that he might have been tried and executed in that spot. Similarly, it's not that far-fetched that he would have made some predictions, and as with most folklore, these details tend to morph over time. How much of it's true, if any of it, I'll let you decide